Yeah, I mean, it really, some people like to like this, hands together. Anybody know that? Skit? One of my favorite skits. Versus this, like whatever feels better for people's fingers, right? But maybe relationship of arms will change what you're doing with your shoulders can change the posture, right? Yeah, so totally superstar it if you want, Nathan. And also with, it doesn't really, this is just gonna be what feels naturally comfortable for people. Okay. That was good. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, I would put that there. In the last class, we had a discussion around, somebody really, like a group, liked the idea that hips back, knees forward in conjunction with arms lifted overhead, shoulders softening can create axial extension together. So it pulls the hips back and it reaches the arms forward. So you have this opposing opposition there. And so that could be there too. Yeah. But yes, for sure, arms lifted overhead, shoulders soften. That's definitely drawing people's spine, lengthening in the spine. Okay, shoulder flexion.
Shoulder flexion. Arms lifted overhead, shoulders soften.
Right. And we talked about softening shoulders, right, versus pulling shoulders down, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
With the logic that you brought in for the axial extension, maybe activate fingers, but we did not put that down.
no, I don't have it. To me, the fingers here doesn't necessarily create more flexion
Right.
of the shoulder.
Yeah.
It creates this like upward energetic motion.
Yeah.
But if it works for you and you want to put it there because that's what you think, then you can.
Elbow extension, arms lifted overhead, shoulders soften.
Yep.
And then activate fingers. We had a couple of demonstrations of that.
Yeah, that could
Changing
draw
things.
that like this way, right? Or this, whatever which way you like your fingers.
Scapular elevation, scapular rotation, arms lifted overhead, shoulders soften.
Yep.
Hip flexion. Am I going fast? What do I do?
You're good.
I see a lot of fingers. Okay, hips back, knees forward, weight in the heels.
Yeah, I actually don't have weight in the heels, but I do agree. I like weight in the heels there too. Because as you bring weight in the heels, what happens? Your hips naturally start to shift back. I don't know why I don't have that, but yes, that should be there.
Hip adduction, stabilizing, feet together, knees together, or feet and knees hip width apart.
Yes. So does everybody understand when I have that word stabilizing, what that means? So if you're in chair and your legs are together, right? So knees together, this chair, this version of chair, this is adduction, right? My legs are together. I hate chair like this, so I go like this. So I'm not adducting, right? I'm really kind of in a neutral position here. I'm not really abducting or adducting. However, I am turning my adductors on so that my knees stay in line with my toes, right? And so I'm using the adductors as a stabilizing mechanism here because my legs are apart. So I want you to know that. So a lot of people, you can come into chair and just plop down and you'll see this happen. Or you'll see this happen. They'll sickle in their knees and their ankles. And so they need to turn on the abductors and the adductors really to sort of make those work. When you're like this, you naturally have a tendency to engage more here. So just be conscientious of that. You don't necessarily have to cue people in that or talk about that, but I think it is nice additional cues to give for individuals, whether their legs are apart or together. You can be using those adductors. It's one of the muscle groups that we use the least. We tend to use our abductors more than our adductors. So our inner thighs tend to be more weak. So yes, so knee flexion.
Knee flexion, hips back, knees forward,
Yes.
ankle dorsiflexion, hips back, knees forward.
And I would also say this is where weight in the heels.
We had a massive debate.
That was a massive debate. I love that.
It was massive, you have no idea, not just like a lot. There's a lot of like, oh gosh, it really got bad.
Because what happens is you draw your weight into the heels, your ankle can move into dorsiflexion. Andrea's like,
What was that?
so as you draw the weight into the heels, there's a natural tendency for people to start to have more dorsiflexion in their ankle. Because as you come back, you start to flex, you can create more flexion in the foot. It's not going to be like a dramatic, like all of a sudden they were pointing their toes on their tippy toes and they dropped into that. But that weight in the heels helps to draw hips back and to create that dorsiflexion. People love to, this is interesting. We might have talked about this. So when I start class, we start with a breathing exercise. When I start hot yoga class, we start standing, always standing, and I will have people come to the mat wherever they want, take a few steps, land in their feet. And then I have them rock into their heels into the balls of the feet. And then I'll have them come to rest where they feel good. But there's a tendency for all of us to either sit back into our heels or to roll into our balls of our feet and our toes, depending on what our anatomy is. And also depending energetically what's happening in people's life. So people that are in a position of inertia, steady state, not wanting to move, tend to be more into their heels. People that are in a forward moving action, need to go, tend to be more into the balls of their feet and their toes. That's not like 100% across the board, but that's one of those really interesting energetics you can kind of like pick up and watch with people and notice it with yourself, like how you're feeling in a day to day, like where you tend to.
Yeah. So can you like change your?
Yes, I mean, do it, stand up and see what it feels like. Just play with like being into your heels and then being into the balls of your feet and like spend some time in the balls of your feet and like sense into like, what does that feel like in your whole body? And then bring the weight into your balls of your feet and then feel like what suddenly, like, how does that feel? Where are you going? What's happening energetically?
Yeah, I feel like I'm more like this way nowadays, but I used to be like that, and that's really interesting comparing like what's happened in my life.
But yeah, it's definitely like when I'm having like.
And there's plenty of people that are really like nicely balanced as well, so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's the verdict, Nathan?
I don't know. Standing on your heels.
I feel like being on my toes feels like I'm.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, so there you go.
Categorize.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Integrative,
So,
operative, directive.
feet together, knees together, feet apart, hip apart, directive,
Yep.
weight in the heels, operative.
Yeah, so we have this as both operative and directive, because you could just tell somebody, wait, put your weight in the heels. That's just like telling somebody what to do, but like really there is some more thought around operative, like it actually is sensational, like feel weight into your heels. So I'm kind of lean more operative, but it could go either way, really.
Hips back, knees forward, directive.
Uh-huh.
Arms lifted overhead, shoulders softened, directive and operative.
Yep.
Activate fingers and shoot those lasers.
Yep.
But operative and integrative.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was fun. Austin was adamant we were leaving that in the dialogue. He was like, no, we're shooting fake lasers. Does everybody get why arms lifted overhead, shoulders softened is directive and integrative, right? The softening. Okay. Great, awesome job. I don't think I've ever had a group literally like that was spot on from my personal perspective. Yeah, nice. So chair, be kind to people in chair. Chair is awful. I for a lot of people, I hate Georgia. Give people space with their feet, right? Some people, it feels really great to put their feet together. Some people, it feels much better to have the feet apart. Make sure you're always giving that space. The other thing is arms, where arms are in relation, right? So this can be very difficult for people if they don't have the space or the movement in their joints to do that. So if their arms are out here and if they're even a little bit more forward, they're not pulled all the way back, like, again, give people space. What's the purpose of chair? Is it really arms?
No.
No, right? The arms are there, they're counterbalance, makes it a little harder. Chair is lovely when your hands are down. Chair is really lovely for me when my hands are in goalposts. I do this all the time in chair, all the time. You can tell me do this. I don't want to do it. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. It's taken me 20 years to be like, sorry, I'm not gonna listen to you and do what I need to do for my body. The other thing when you're in chair, revolved chair.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, that-
Well, me too, hate it. Why? Most people, when we don't actually have revolved here in chair, but where does rotation happen in the spine majority?
Above the- What is that, thoracic?
In the thoracic and also
Cervical.
correct, where is the limited amount?
lumbar.
Lumbar, right? So what do most people try to do in revolving and through chair? Where do they
Push
try?
their knee
Hip
forward
press
and-
and the hips.
Right,
Yeah,
they're
that's-
moving through their lumbar spine. So in order to get the lumbar to get that rotation, you've got to actually move your hips with it. So when you're in chair, you're not really trying to rotate through the lumbar spine, though people will try to do that because they're trying very desperately to get this elbow to the side. So they do this, right? And then they usually don't have this rotation through the thoracic and the cervical spine. They kind of keep that limited because they're trying so hard to look like a certain thing. So give people space again, really tell them, find that rotation through your chest, right? Through your upper rib cage, whatever you want to say, and then have them come down and rotate. This is where I feel comfortable. If you ask me to now come down and drop my elbow to my, oh, sorry, Christina. Down to my knee, I now am going to create a lot of compression. And now I'm really tight through my thoracic. It doesn't feel good for me. So I love to do it like this because I just have plenty of rotation when I can use my hands in this space.
What are you doing with that back arm? Oh, on the sacrum.
It's on my sacrum. It's key. So my hips stay level. So I don't want to, right? Like I don't want to do this because now I've pulled my body out of alignment. I'm keeping my hips level-ish. And then I'm just finding that I'm using the pressure of my hand to create this openness through my chest,
I like that.
right? And then I can keep my core engaged because a lot of people release engagement of the core in order to get down and do this.
Yeah.
Right?
So how would you cue what you're doing?
So you'd have them cue into revolve. But usually it's bring your hands together, twist, bring the elbow to the knee. If you need to, relax the hands, let your hand, one hand come to your sacrum and one hand come to your knee, find the twist through your spine, something like that. I don't know. Make sense? Okay. Giving people options, because I really hate when I see twisting being forced. Right, and there are plenty of people that can do it and do it just fine. Bring their elbows to their knee and find that rotation. It's not an issue at all, but for some, me included, you won't, if I'm taking your class, you very rarely see me come all the way down and do that.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Can you give that option for revolved crescent?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you ask me to do revolve crescent, you'll see me do the exact same thing.
Oh, I hate revolved crescent.
Yeah, because if it doesn't, see, I like this postures I don't like, I'm like, why don't I like them? Like, what's happening in my body that I don't like it? Can I create more ease, yet still be working in the posture? Like, I'm still working. I still have rotation. Yeah. I don't need to keep turning this. I just need this one. So first of all, I think we're at crescents in here. We have revolve crescent. But first of all, crescent is, people hate crescent.
Yeah.
It's a really hard posture to do, right? So most people have their feet too close together. They don't have them sort of railroaded. in a way that gives them space. Lots of people try to get this back leg straight and get this knee bent. That's really uncomfortable. You want to have a little bend in the knee here, right? Then when they come down, they really have to come forward. They have to find that length. It's the same thing. Let me go this way so you can see me. It's the same thing, right? You've just done this to this. So now we're not worrying about the knee coming, but they're going to do the same thing. Most people crunch down and stay down. Now, crunching down is fine.
Okay.
I don't want to say it's not, but you want to maintain length as you come down. You don't want to be like this, right? You want to be able to stay long, turn, and keep your length as you come down. So for me right here, I stick. I'm stuck, especially after being pregnant. My ribs are really in a really weird way. So I'm twisted. Rather than like efforting down to get my, what's the point? Like, what am I doing? What am I getting more out of that? So I just here, and now I rotate. This is really, I hate that. It's really hard right now to hold this. Because then what people will do is forget that their legs are engaged. And they'll just drop into it just to get down and in. Same thing when people are trying to come down into a bind, right? They'll forget. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Rather than being lengthened all the way through. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
For people that are of shorter stature, it often gives more space for us to put our hands like that.
I just like the open twist.
Yeah, the open twist is fine.
Because I feel like I do have that space to twist.
Uh-huh.
But I also feel like when I do this, I just naturally like soften my core. Like it,
People
I just
naturally soften
forget
it.
about it. And
Uh-huh.
so this forces me, instead of doing a compressed twist, an open twist forces me to like engage my core.
Yeah. And there is something about compression, right? When you come in and you're compressed a little bit more, it's nice to be able to compress and then open up and expand. But there's people that it just comes more naturally to. Like you have a nice long torso, so it's probably nice. That movement for you feels better. People that are top heavy, people that have heavy abdomens, you ask them to twist, that's not really comfortable for people that are twisting in that. It can be a very, they're very self-conscious around it. So just finding ways to create space in your twists as well. You're still getting the twist. Okay. Did that answer the question, Katie? I don't know. Okay.
You're good. Thank you.
Okay, let's do lunge.
Okay, lunge. So for spinal flexion, or to spinal flexion and axial extension, so for spinal flexion, we had step foot between hands.
Yes, so
So you kind of cat a little bit
Yeah.
when you,
and I would also say it's the same for axial extension.
okay.
What did you have for axial extension?
Oh, well, we had that, and then we also had, we weren't sure, we thought like when you level your hips and
Yes.
engage your inner thighs, it actually will pull your.
That was great, yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk about this really quick. So why do I have axial extension and spinal flexion there? Okay, so you're doing a lunge, right? So you're coming from, I don't know what you come from in this, but yeah, you'll come from down dog usually, right? So here, first of all, be aware that this movement for people, that does not come naturally. This, a lot of people go like this. Okay.
Yeah.
Or they'll go like, hey, they gotta help themselves, or they have to do this. They have to bring their leg out and then get it.
Or swing.
Yeah, they,
Yeah.
I do like.
yeah,
That's what I
swing it out. Cause they haven't, Christina, can you see? Okay. This takes a lot of ability to do that.
Practice.
So I actually oftentimes, just because sometimes when my low back is aggravated, I do this.
That's what I do. Yeah.
Oh.
Because now I'm not gonna create more pain and pressure on my back. I keep my spine long. So again, when you're demoing and giving options, you can always say, if you're having a hard time stepping forward, just come down to your knees, come up, step forward, and then come up, right? Blocks. I use blocks and lunge all the time.
Yeah, same.
So when you do this, most people, just like you guys said, so here's lunge. You see what's happening? I'm trying to make it more obvious. In order to get down, they have spinal flexion. There's round. It's okay, it's fine. But now I put blocks. Now I've got this nice long extension in my spine.
You want me, you want these blocks? It's okay.
Like you wanted a cat back.
Huh?
Do you not want a cat back and lunge?
You,
People say, like, give yourself a cat back so you can get your foot through.
yeah, when you're stepping through,
Transition, yeah.
Oh, it's just for the transition.
usually, it doesn't matter, it's okay. Like some people will have a little bit around here. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're trying to find more length, right? Either let them, the more open you get, the more you can come down and do this, but your hips have to be really open. Gotta have length in your arms. So the blocks helps to get more extension here. So we can focus on our legs and our lunge. It's not wrong to have spinal flexion, which is why I have that in there. You're gonna see both of these things. Okay. People that have low back issues, low back pain particularly, that forward folding, that spinal flexion can be painful for them. So we want to give their body space to find more length. Yeah. So that's why both of those are there. You won't see. I'm sorry, you're seeing in the back of my head, Christina. She just saw me, like my whole hair came up in the video. Yeah, so I love blocks and lunging for that reason, to maintain axial extension. I use them all the time. Okay. Shoulder flexion.
Okay, so for shoulder flexion, we said step foot between hands.
Yep.
For elbow extension, we said step foot between hands.
Yep.
Okay.
You guys get that? Because as you step forward, it brings the arms into flexion, right? Okay.
So for the front leg with knee flexion, we said step foot between hands
Yes,
and ankle stacks underneath.
yes, exactly.
For the front leg with hip flexion, we said step foot between hands.
Yeah. Anything else?
So we were a little on, we weren't sure about like saying to level the hips or to engage the inner thighs, because we thought that maybe that just stabilizes you more. It doesn't necessarily change your hip flexion. So we were a little.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so, okay, how about everybody just pops in really quick? Everybody step into a lunge. Just a little bit of movement. Doesn't matter what foot's forward. Oh, it feels good, doesn't it?
I am so
This is why you
sorry.
don't do lunch.
Right straight out the bat.
Yeah, good. So now, so you stepped your foot between your hand. Now find ankle under your knee. Everybody's pretty much there, right? And then see if you can play with your hips a little bit. So leveling hips, right? Let's just see what that feels like. Go out of level and then back into level.
Oh, it does kind of change the angle.
So for certain people, leveling hips can create more hip flexion in the front leg and more hip extension in the back leg. So just depending,
Hips.
what?
I've never understood how to just level my hips. Like, it's not intuitive to me.
Right, that is why this is an integrative cue. So
Stand, come just stand. Huh? There's not really, so that's a good question. So stand straight up. Just stand in tree. Put your hands on your hip bones. Good, so you feel where your hips are at. Hips are level in this plane that you're in. Relatively speaking, you might have one a little higher than the other. Most people have that, that's okay. But that you're level right now, right? Now, Nathan, hitch one hip up. And one hip down. Hitch it up and hitch the other down. Do you know how to do that?
Like, I have to move my leg.
Exactly. Good. So
Oh, so you can't just,
now you're uneven standing, right? Like when you have your hip hitched a little bit, right? Good. Now step into lunge. Just step back, or it doesn't matter. Go into lunge. Just with your hips normal. Yeah, that's great. Keep your hands right there in your hips. Good. Now, go into what your normal lunge would be. Perfect. Now let your right hip sag down and let your left hip go up. Yeah. Now your left hips are not level. Now you're level. You already intuitively, innately have level hips.
ah,
Yeah, I can make mine really.
Do you want to show? Come right up here if you don't mind to show, because this is really good to see, because this is a hard cue, right? Like you guys are like, I don't know, your students aren't, right? So there's a Shay. Good. So what's happening with your knee there? There we go. Okay, good. Now make your hips wonky for us. Yeah, they're just, see her right hips up, her left hips down. Now come back and find some more level. Yeah. So a lot of people will dip one hip and lift the other, or do that, or they'll come down too far. Right? But they'll have this rotational aspect that's happening in lunge. They sort of rotate one hip down, lift one hip up. Yeah, thanks. So.
okay, so the only way to fix it is to like engage some muscles in your legs.
Right. So you want to, yes.
So you feel,
Yeah. So you'll feel the shift. Usually if you engage inner thighs, if you pull your inner thighs, like you're pulling them in together, that starts to pull your hips in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
If you engage your back leg, if you engage your gluteal muscle in your back leg and you push through the ball of your foot, that allows that extension through that hip to happen. So it pulls it up a little bit.
Yeah, when I don't have a lot of pressure and the leg that's extended back, then I can really like
Wiggle around. Yeah.
But
Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it's a motion with the legs, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they're really the only real hip. So we say hips. There are hip muscles all around the hips, right? The abductors, the adductors, the go-go cues. Those are the really big ones. But in the iliopsoas, right? So but you also have your hamstrings and your gluteal muscles. Sorry, your hamstrings, the gluteal muscles, and your quadriceps. All of that is connecting up into the pelvic region. So as you are utilizing muscles in the lower area of your upper leg, or the lower body, but your upper legs, you're going to be able to make your hips do things differently, depending on how you are or are not engaging them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. Okay, so that derailed us again. Sorry. Front foot ankle dorsiflexion.
Okay, so for the ankle dorsiflexion front foot, we said ankle stacked underneath.
Yep. And I would say you're stepping, when you step forward, you step into dorsiflexion.
For hip extension in the back leg, we said back leg engaged. And then I guess we could add the level.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah. So, well, another group likes that when you step your foot forward, you automatically allow that back leg to move into extension as you step forward too.
Okay. And then for knee extension in the back leg leg engaged.
Yep.
And I guess we could say step between hands.
You could, yeah.
For ankle dorsiflexion in the back foot, we also said back leg engaged.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And then Nathan and I were just talking about this, we added something,
Nice.
hip adduction.
Yeah.
We added, for that, engaging inner thighs.
Yes, totally agree. You might have that, I actually have that in my notes to talk to you guys about. You want people to engage their inner thighs here. I'm gonna have you jump real quick back into it.
It's a hip adduction or hip.
Add adduction
Together, yeah.
to get that stabilization. So pop into lunge, maybe use your other foot now.
Yeah.
And
Oh my gosh.
play with it. Let your inner thighs, let there be no strength there. And then engage them. But a lot of people don't have any engagement in those areas. They're just and remember, lunge is happening when? Typically after you go through a flow, down dog, step forward, lunge, then you're up into something else. So what do? You run through lunge. You just get through it. So you're just stepping and then there's not engagement there. So just being aware of what that feels like. And then you could do high lunge like you guys are doing coming up. Put your hands in.
Balance, like in crescent.
Yes,
Keeps your.
it really brings everything midline.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
During three-legged down dog.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know who said it, but when they said, like, when you really engage your thigh before going into your lunge, it just helps me bring my foot forward so much better.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. A lot of people just let that leg
Yeah.
be like a swingy thing and it comes forward and there's not like a thought about it. Cause often it's like down dog, good. Extend your right leg up, good, step forward into like it's not a time space to be able to like give people time to like, ooh, turn that leg on,
Yeah.
step forward with some conscious effort, plant the foot, engage the legs, now rise up, right? It's usually like in a pretty, we're not nearly as bad at Cambio with like running people through things. But there are lots of places in studios where, man, I'm like, forget it. I'm not
I
going
hate
fast.
that.
I can't breathe that fast. So yeah, I actually have engage inner thighs. That helps to turn on your adductors, right? Your abductors are already naturally sort of working in that space, but we want the adductors on. Awesome. So real quick, let's do directive, operative, integrative, and then we'll take a 7-minute break.
Okay. For the transitional cue step foot between hands, we said
Mhm.
directive. For ankle stacks underneath, we said directive.
Yep.
And then back leg engaged, operative.
Yeah.
Level the hips. We said operative. I heard you say integrated.
I say it's integrative. But
Yeah.
leveling hips, you just saw what we did with Nathan, right? Like he's in teacher training. He has awareness of that. And even he's like, I don't really know leveling hips. So for most individuals in your class, you're going to tell them to level hips. Like, I don't even know what my hips are. What does that mean? What am I supposed to engage? So that's a very integrative cue. There's a lot of things happening in order to get hips level.
Okay.
Oh, that's integrated.
I would say it's integrative. You could say operative for sure, but I would say, because it's also sensational for people in finding level, but there's like layers of things happening and leveling your hips.
What's the difference between squaring and leveling? I've always wondered that too.
That is a great question. So it would be depending on what plane you're in, right?
So I was like squaring was front to back. Leveling was
Usually
front to
when
back.
you're hearing someone say square the hips, you're in an upright position and you're pulling you're in this frontal plane.
Yeah.
So you're coming fronts and forwards and backwards with your hips. That's more squaring. Leveling tends to be like side to side when you're shifting side to side. So like when you're in a lunge, when you look at someone, even though it's up and down, it is also, there's this tilting side to side. So they could be leveling and squaring their hips at the same time. Some people interchangeably use leveling and squaring, which is probably totally fine to do that too. You're just trying to find evenness through the hip, through the pelvic girdle, really, through the upper portion of your hips at those ASIS points, because people tend to be wonky. They pull their hips forwards and backwards and up and down. that make sense?
Mhm.
So you could probably get away with say square your hips when you're in a lunge.
I guess square gets,
I,
kind of get both directions, if it's square.
yeah,
Cube your.
cube your hips. We really don't say squaring your hips anymore.
Yeah.
Because when you usually hear that cue, we'll talk about it here. It's when you tend to be in warrior two, side angle. You'll hear people say, square your hips to the side wall. Most people can't square their hips to the side wall. They're not open enough. They actually need rotation in the back hip, in the extended leg to be able to get into that. And we'll talk about that in a second. So I would be surprised if we have there's one place in where we talk about squaring hips. I think it's in Pigeon. I have to look exactly where it is in our diet. We like purposely have squaring of the hips here and we talk about it. But we really try to avoid actually squaring hips because it's usually meant to square the hips. It's an opening of the hip to get the hips open. And most people don't have an openness that much in their hips to get them open and parallel to a
So we're
wall.
just to find evenness in the hips.
Yeah, find even, yeah, I think that's great. Even out your hips. I'll often tell people,
Yeah, even out your hips makes,
yeah, I'll say to people when I'm teaching, hey, bring your left hip forward, bring your right hip back. Pull your right hip back, drop your left hip down and forward. You will really hear me say square your hip or level your hip, which now that I have this discussion, I'll take it back to our team and say, yeah, maybe we need to change that. Even you'll probably hear most people say even your
I'm
hips,
thinking like a,
like a level.
yeah, like a tool.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a.
Yeah. Okay, take a break. And then we'll jump into warrior two. Cool. Oh, I don't know, 7 minutes. All right, warrior two, ready? Not yet, they're not technically ready.
So for axial extension,
Yes.
we put, we somehow put lengthen through spine. That's not a cue, but that's what. we-
None of the cues were really, unless you would consider gaze over front middle finger or forward axial extension, but
That's-
So I love that you made up your own cue.
No, I'm serious. Like, that's part of what we're hopeful that you'll do is be like, oh, you guys aren't telling us to say this. Like, yeah, you're right. So yeah, that one works. The gaze, yeah, if you tell somebody to gaze forward, that can draw in the axial extension. The one that we have here is legs and core engage. So as you engage your legs and engage the core, as you engage the core, people tend to find length through the spine. So that was kind of a hidden one.
And then hip abduction, we put knee reaches ankle. Wait, did I write that? No, knee reaches forward. I can't read.
Yeah, and towards middle three toes.
And then front ankle, knee, and sit bone all in line.
Yeah, so knee reaching forward and towards the middle three toes, I'm not sure that's directly abduction. But the front ankle, knee, and sit bone all in one line, as the knee, usually the leg has to come out into external rotation and abduction. Not necessarily external rotation. If you go beyond that, you're externally rotating, but that creates abduction, right? That movement there.
You put
And
spin back heel down.
yes, back heel parallel to the back of the mat does abduction.
Oh, dang it, I wrote the wrong spot.
And then you could, I mean, you could argue legs and core engaging here, the legs engaging the outside of the legs, the abductors engaging, but that one's a little bit more reaching, but
Yeah.
that could be there too.
Front leg knee flexion, we did knee reaches forward and front ankle, knee and sit bone all in line.
Yes, agree.
And I think same thing for front leg hip flexion.
Exactly. So knee flexion and hip flexion, for those of you that are doing this, they're the same cues.
And then front leg externally. what was it?
External rotation. Mhm.
Knee reaches. And then front ankle. So is it the same?
Same,
Yeah.
yep, you got it.
Back leg. Hip internal rotation or neutral.
Yep.
God, my handwriting.
That's okay.
Spin back heel down.
Yep,
Back foot parallel.
yes.
That's it.
And then this is where front ankle, knee, and sit bone all in one line,
Oh, yeah.
right? That can pull that hip into, let me show you what that means. So, let's finish and then I'm gonna have you all get into warrior two.
I think we have the same for the back leg, knee.
So back leg knee extension, you have spin the back heel down, back foot parallel to the back of the mat, and then you have front ankle, knee, and sit bone all in one line.
Yes.
Sure, I don't really think the front knee, ankle, knee, and sit bone all in one line necessarily help with knee extension, but we'll talk about that when we get in there, but you can leave that there.
Okay.
By the way, all of the knee and the hips and the external rotation, you could also have legs and core engage.
Oh, yeah.
You could have that throughout the whole thing. As you turn your legs on, it can help with all of those movements.
yeah, we were
I
talking
think we
about
had
these
the-
cues and then I go, wait, we didn't use legs and core engage and then we were like, that can
That
never
could
really
go
be used
for
for
everything,
any of it.
Agreed. And then let's do the arms.
Shoulder lateral and shoulder external.
Uh-huh.
We have the same thing, the arms reach front to back.
Yep. And then I would also add gaze over.
Okay, yeah. I think I have it first.
Okay.
Elbow. Elbow extension?
Yeah.
Yep. elbow extension, arms reach. And then forearm pronation, arms reach.
Yeah, so all shoulders, elbow and forearm, they're all the same cue. Arms reach to front or back and gaze over front, middle finger or forward. Okay. And we have, you can see elbow flexion, right? So this is extension. This is typical warrior two, but when you watch me do it, I'm like this
Oh,
because I don't like this.
yeah.
Okay. So you can see people bend their elbows. Cool.
But they were all directed.
Yeah.
So-
The one they wrote that.
Except he said, so I would argue that the legs and core engage is actually operative. Okay, because you're talking, you're actually going to feel something through engagement. And then the front ankle, knee and sit bone all in one line. I think this is an integrative cue, which you're going to see why when we get into this. There's a lot happening there when you're telling people to do all of that. All right, so let's everybody pop up into your warrior two. I don't care which leg is forward. I know, stretch.
Dude, I'm sore from yesterday.
Hips are really sore.
No, thank you.
Okay. Good. All right, Kim, I'm gonna use you, and Carly, I'm gonna use you, if that's okay. Will you guys come up to the front? And everybody can jump in and do the other side really quick while you're just so you turn yourself off. Christina, I'll make sure you can see them. Will you guys? Will you both go over here so I can just turn it off?
Right or left side?
Whatever you guys were just doing, I'll let you just, but wait, I'm gonna tell you who to do first. Okay,
That's what I feel like.
and then Nathan. Yeah, Liz. Okay, perfect. Okay, so there's a couple things that you guys are gonna feel as I'm gonna show you this. So I wanna show you, Kim, I wanna show Kim first. So Kim, just come into your,
I think you're lucky.
Thank you.
good. Okay, so now, Kim, I'm gonna have you bring your right knee out a little bit. So start, and line your knee up with your middle couple toes. Good. Now press into the outside of the back leg and start to squeeze the left thigh. Good. Now I want you to take your back hip and I want you to try to square it to that back wall.
Can't.
Right? She can't. So do you see how her left hip, which you should, so I don't want you to do that. Do you see how her left hip is drawn towards me?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what's working for her body. Christina, can you, let me do this. It's gonna be really hard to kind of see that. Good. Now start to, rotate more. Now bring your back arm more towards your left, towards Carly. Yeah, good. Now soften your shoulders. There you go. Good. Now engage your inner thighs and your core. Did you see how she went? Boop,
Yeah, lift up.
boop. Press into your heels on both sides. Now bring that knee back out again a little bit. The right knee.
Oh.
And do you see? Great. Now let your knee turn in again. Now bring your knee back out. Do you see as she does that? She naturally has to draw her left hip down.
Yeah.
It has to come down because she doesn't have the openness in her hips. You can come out now because I know that's really painful. So that's great. So what I want you to be thoughtful about is watching that knee supple in. You want to have it come out and it's going to pull your hip down. Now you stay there. Now, Carly, I want you to come in and I want you to do yours.
So we're doing the same side as you.
Yeah, so they can see your hips. Good. Now you see Carly's hip.
Yeah.
She has her hips open towards the back wall, right? Bring your right knee out just a little bit more. Actually, can you make your foot more, straight? Yeah, there. Now sit into it. Open that knee just a little bit. Tuck your hips under a smidge. Pull your core and engage your thighs. Soften your shoulders. Really squeeze that left hip. Now, can you pull your left hip? Can you turn your left hip down and in a little bit? Can you reopen the knee? And how does that feel compared to opening your hips?
It kind of gives me some sort of pain back here in my knee. That hurts my knee a bit.
Okay, so then keep your hips open.
Yeah, it feels
You're really working hard, aren't
a
you?
little.
Keep your inner,
A little bit. I mean,
yeah, turn your inner thighs on. Engage your inner thighs, engage your core, soften your shoulders again. Yeah, good, great. Okay, so come back out. So do you see the dramatic? So Carly has really open hips. She can have her hips in that neutral position. That's what we used to call squaring of the hips. If we ask Kim to square her hips, she's gonna look at me like she did. She's like, I cannot do it. It doesn't feel good. As people start to come into their knee, so, and the other thing too, not tuck, sorry, come back into it. Just come into it. Push your hips towards the window. Yeah, now sit down. Open your knee up. Engage, soften the shoulders. Squeeze, push the outside of your foot down, pull up through your ankle. Yeah. Squeeze your thigh. Open your knee a little bit more again. She really wants to draw that knee down and in. Yeah. Good. Can you relax your front toes? So that you'll see people grip with their toes.
yeah.
Rather than
That
pressing them.
helps me like pull it a bit.
Yeah. So I want you guys to sort of feel into that. So I can get into my warrior two. I have the ability to open my hip and draw my hip down.
Yeah, which should you do?
Whatever feels better for your body. The more I've realized things, I'm like, oh, actually, this feels much better for me. To have internal rotation of my left hip as I'm into this. I can do this, but what's happening is I'm pulling, now I'm straining through here and here in order to get this. And it's making this hard for me to pull this out. So as I come in and fit into this more, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can do that, right? So we take away squaring hips when we're doing these separate legs, because someone like Kim, I don't want her to square her hips. She needs to pull her left hip down and in naturally, right? The more open people get, Amy's a great example of this too. Amy can, on one side, she really opens up. On the other side, she can't even open up her hip, but she didn't know that. So she was really trying to force things for a while. Liz is really open. She can pull her hips, right? But I want her to play with it and see, well, what feels better? I think most people find that actually having a little bit of internal rotation here feels more stable and takes pressure out of this link here. You've got to be careful because you have some hyperextension happening too, where it's easy for you to push back and open a little bit through this back leg.
You say I was hyperextending?
You have a little bit of hyperextension.
I've never noticed it myself. I didn't think I did.
Yeah, pull your pant leg up. Can you pull it beyond your knee or not?
Do what?
Can you pull it up or it's not?
I mean, that's like a
So straighten your leg. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Is there really?
Yeah.
Now I want you to, so hold that. Just go to what you would normally do, like right there. Now I want, do you see how she did that naturally? She went, oh, I want to do this, because now this is on.
Yeah,
Now going to hyper, she's not using this.
Is that what you do for triangle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do the full.
Well, yeah, I guess
So when you're in this
I
leg,
Oh, it's hyper.
right, you're having it, she has an ability to push back and keep her hip open. So I want you to have a little engagement here, which now may actually have her want to pull this left hip a little bit more.
okay.
Just
Yeah.
because you're just not, you naturally can go boom. I can't do it. I don't have any. I have very little hyperextension. She's gonna bend her. You have a little bit of bend in her knee.
Yeah.
What if it feels better to have this?
Most people want to have their leg in hyperextension that are hyperextenders.
Because for me, it feels pain if I don't do that.
Like if you engage the leg and, because you're hyperextending right now.
Yeah, that feels perfectly comfortable, then I try to bend it, hurts.
Okay, that's fine. Let's be clear about hyperextension. We haven't had this conversation yet, so thank you. That was really good. So everybody just kind of play with their triangle.
Like I always knew that like it can like
It's
settle like that, but I never considered it hyper, because I see so many people that are like can like.
But you
really-
heard the reaction. Everybody-
Yeah.
And for you, it's your natural thing.
Yeah.
So here's the conversation on hyperextension. You've heard me in
But it
the online videos.
good right here.
Hang on, you guys. Yeah, no, you're fine. Keep doing it. But let me talk about to you about hyperextension as you kind of play with this. So Carly and Nathan, that's natural for them. Hyperextension is not wrong. That is their natural joint range of motion. That works for them. There is nothing inappropriate about that. Where it can become an issue is when you are doing consistently repetitive motion over and over and over, and you drop into the joint and you don't have engagement of the muscular area around the joint, then they're prone to repetitive injuries, because they're going into it, and not engaging. For Nathan, you might be fine with having a little bit of hyperextension if it feels better in your body than having this bend in the knee. I'm not trying to tell you you have to bend the knee, but play with your hips when you're in there too, because I feel like you might need to.
Yeah, I feel like if I drop my hip, then I can bend my knee.
Yes, exactly correct.
I like what you told me about
Yeah.
when you said to like take my hands like towards the wall, like
Yes.
that. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, so the other thing in worry, so let me finish the hyperextension, then we'll talk about that. So the thing about that is that when we talk about hyperextension, a true injury, a true hyperextension is actually injurious to somebody. Somebody that has a hyperextension injury, they are somebody that's got their knee blown out, their knee hyperextended in the opposite direction. They hyperextended their ankle, their shoulder. Those are typically happening in sports-related injuries. Different than the hyperextension we're talking about here. It's not causing necessarily this like tissue damage that requires repair or requires rehabilitation, but over time can lead to damage. So that's why you hear us say, find a little bit of bend in the knee, because as we bend, she bends her knee, she has to engage in order to stay still and steady. That people that have more propensity to hyperextend cannot bend the leg without finding engagement. It will feel very odd. And Nathan, that was really great for you that you were like, oh yeah, I have to move my hip in order to get that, right?
Also, I just noticed that if I'm in hyperextension and it's a micro bend, all that means for me is if I engage, I just go straight.
Yeah, you're gonna go and
But I
go,
always used to think that no, you had to do.
no,
bend,
no,
But a
so
micro bend is just straight.
for you.
But yeah.
Because your hyperextension is beyond what we're used to seeing visually, that line, like you pop your leg back. So your straight is like, oh, now I'm suddenly straight. So if someone's cueing me to bend my knee, I know my body well enough. I don't need to actually have bend in my leg when I'm doing triangle, because I don't have a propensity to go beyond a range of motion. I can have, look, this, you don't see this. I don't have a ton of range of motion there. So I can go straight. Carly, on the other hand, can put her whole knee back.
Yeah.
And you can even see it through her back hands. Right?
That's crazy.
So I want her to bend her knee a little bit, because it turns on, she's forced to engage the muscle around the joint. I am already engaging. Now I can sit here and do this and not engage my muscle. Now I gotta turn it on. Yeah.
So now let's say that you're teaching a class and you know, cue bend your knee. Let's say someone doesn't even know that they have hyperextension in their knee.
Mhm.
Like
What,
me.
yeah, like Carly. They're like, what? What's something that you can cue, like almost a sensation that they should feel it, like that they should feel?
Engage your quadriceps, engage your
Yeah.
thighs.
Yeah.
Turn your upper leg muscles on. Feel your hamstrings working. Point to it when you're telling people, hey, when I'm usually using anatomical language, someone will be here and be like, in a time of non-COVID, I would actually put my finger on them and say, engage your quadricep right here, just touch, and they can do that. So now I just say, good, great, go ahead. You just saw what I did with Carly, right? I did touch you, sorry. But then I'd say, good, bend your knee a little bit. Good, squeeze these muscles up, tighten these muscles. Good, now push your hips forward, tighten your glutes, squeeze your glutes. I would just come by, and I would say it loud enough so everybody in the room can hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's the muscle, she hates it. I'm like, right, so the other thing about Warrior 2, go back into that with your hips, how I didn't want you to have them. So when people want to get into Warrior 2, and I gotta get in, they'll do this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in. Right? So, because they're trying to get down further. So we want them to actually come up and push your hips forward. Don't say tuck your tailbone because then they're gonna go like this. Okay, so just push your hips forward. I said press your hips forward and she went, oh. Right?
Yeah.
And now she might have to bend her knee and rotate her hip a little bit because suddenly she doesn't have this space.
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
for you
that
guys,
also
I've
depends.
literally been doing that wrong for a long time, because
Yeah.
right when I did that, this
Turns
fired
the
up.
exercise up.
Yeah.
And it might be very, very, very subtle for certain, like yours was not overtly obvious. There, yeah. And you don't necessarily, I don't want you to tuck them all the way under, but there are people that really have this like hyperlordosis where they're really pushing their hips out and back to try to get in. And so we just want them to gently bring the hips forward to start to get into the hips a little bit more. Be conscientious of those, because some people have what appears to be hyperlordosis. We talked about this. It looks like they have more curve in the back and they're not actually doing that, but they just have more muscle in their gluteal area. So it will make it appear as if they have more hyperextension, and they don't. So you ask them to do that and they're going to be very uncomfortable. Yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts? He wants to know if you can hyperextend your eyes.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I grew up with a best friend who could like
Yeah.
make hers go like way past it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I
feel like
don't
it's
know.
like I'm saying, like, I had hyperextension, but like I had a friend who like what was super like everything was very like hyperextension-y, and I just like, no, that's not.
You
me.
don't.
Yeah.
But then I was.
Katie, you don't.
Yeah.
Oh, it does a little bit. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some sort of syndrome that has that, like all your joints are hyperextended.
There are people that have, yeah, that actually their joints fall out all the time. Like they separate their shoulders and their knees. I had a friend that had that. She had hyperlex. I don't know what it is. I'll look it up. Anyway, so yeah, those are the couple things that I worry too. So anytime you're in those separate leg poses, right, we want those inner thighs turned on. We want the knees in alignment. So you stay in that for Warrior 2, and then you go into same thing applies to extended side angle. Same thing applies to reverse lunge, because you're not changing your legs, you're changing the upper body in relationship to the legs, right? So all of that stuff there are some things about extended side angle we'll talk about, because people lose the core a ton in extended side angle because they want their hand on the floor and they want to look like a certain thing, and they crunch down and they don't actually get extension through the sides. And so I encourage blocks and not even going down that far, but we'll get to that next time. Yeah, so play with your hips in your Warrior 2 when you practice this week and just see what it feels like. Just notice that open versus more internal rotation, or neutral versus internal rotation, and what it feels like and how you need to adjust the rest of your body to sort of create that. Work on engaging. Yeah. Kim, work on keeping that knee sort of pulled out. Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna pause there. We'll pick up with the rest of it next time. We'll kind of knock through those and then we'll pop into number 4 after that. We'll play with crescent, next week too. I think it's next week. I don't remember when I see you again. Crescent's another one we'll want to look at for you guys too, because, and then this is all stuff you're gonna do again. You'll do, you might have had some with Amber last week. Did you guys do adjustment? What was that that you did?
Oh, we did beginners.
Oh, you did beginners with Amber?
Yeah. And then I think the adjustments is gonna be with Laura.
Oh, adjustment. No, there's
Oh,
adaptations. Yeah,
Oh,
you'll do that. Yeah, you'll do
okay.
that with Laura too.
Okay.
That'll be about adjusting other people. But then you'll have a session with Amber. I just lost the name of what we call it, but essentially you'll do this. You'll kind of look at each other in postures. You'll try to figure that stuff out. So yeah, it's nice to have somebody look at you and help you with those things. So that's it. We're gonna call it for the day.
The awesome cleanup.
Yes, it's awesome to clean up. Yeah, yeah.
I'm excited for that too.
Yeah. Any questions, comments, thoughts? No.
I have a question.
Yeah, I have an answer. Up she comes.
Ever since I started this program and doing yoga regularly, my knees hurt all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's like a real loaded question. I have to watch I have to see what your practice looks like. So my first initial guess is you have probably tight hamstrings and tight quads. Although you probably have more flexibility than most because of your jujitsu. But you're probably opening up your hips and your hamstrings and your quads, which is creating tension and tightness on the knees. Because as those things move, your knees can take the brunt of that. I'd also just have to watch you where you're placing your feet in relation, your ankles in relation to your knees, in relation to your hips. If your stance is wide enough, if it needs to be shorter, like what it all looks like. So my first inclination though, it's just you're shifting muscular tissue around. So it's just creating openings in different ways and spaces. And so your body's trying to adjust to that. And lots of people can feel it in their knees. Yeah, I just don't teach class. I don't teach regularly anymore. So, and I don't teach vinyasa. So I like to take vinyasa. I don't like to teach it because I don't want to. It's after 20 years, I want to just do what I take, not teach what I take. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to play with it and just kind of see and look. And if you're in class with one of the teachers, you can say, hey, do you mind just kind of peeking at me as you go through class and see if you notice anything in alignment wise or looks like I'm doing anything that might be causing more tension and pressure in my knees. So yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Go have a break. Austin should be here soon.
I'm so happy about the,
Yeah.
the hips, the level of hips and the square of the hips conversation.